Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
There's a story from Michigan I'd heard about, and then I wasn't sure how many people would find it as interesting as I did. But it turns out quite a few, because I got a lot of people sending me this story. And it has to do with an archaic law on the books in Michigan. And many states have got laws, and those laws are written down in books. And so I've mentioned before, the blue books behind me are a set of the laws from Michigan. And so if you were to flip through there and poke around a little bit, you'd find some laws that were passed a long, long time ago that nobody's bothering to enforce anymore, okay? But they're still there. And so to remove a law from the law books, quite often you got to go in and go through all the same steps that were gone through to pass the law. And so you've actually got to introduce a bill to repeal it, and then both houses have got to pass that, and then the governor's got to sign it. So rather than go through all that trouble, a lot of times they just leave them on the books. And so years later, decades later, people look back on these laws and go, whoa, that used to be illegal? Oh, wait a second, it's still illegal. So the headline from the Detroit News a couple days ago was, Michigan senators spar over unenforced penalty for unmarried couples living together. Michigan is a state where the law says, the one that's on the books, it is illegal for an unmarried couple to live together. And by the way, there's some other dumb old laws on the books like this one. And so they're now working on getting this law repealed. But of course, it's kind of bizarre that it's still there. So the state Senate recently approved a bill with 9 senators in opposition that would remove a Michigan law, and it's an unenforced law, that makes it a misdemeanor for an unmarried man and woman to live together. Now, a couple lawmakers who voted against the proposal, that's the repeal proposed, argued that keeping the law on the books would encourage marriage and strengthen families. One man said the reasons for the long-standing policy are clearly not obsolete. What year are they living in? Someone else asked about that remark when asked by reporters. A 2016 analysis by the nonpartisan Senate Fiscal Agency said only Michigan and Mississippi still had laws on the books that prohibit cohabitation by unmarried couples and described the standard in Michigan as essentially unenforced. I've obviously never heard of anybody being prosecuted for this, and I highly doubt that it's ever been used in a prosecution in the last 50 or 60 years. However, the state law, which dates back to at least 1931, is probably older, has some tax implications, according to the people who studied this. And it has to do with federal law on filing individuals' tax returns and what they can claim with respect to being a dependent and relationships and so on. And believe it or not, there's a part of the tax code that says that if that living arrangement is illegal in the state in which the person resides, then the tax consequence changes. And so because Michigan and one other state have got these on the books, those states would actually penalize somebody, theoretically. And again, like I said, the law itself has never been enforced, and I don't know if that penalty has ever been enforced. So a senator from Detroit said this law will help some individuals in our state by reducing their tax burden. She added that it will also bring us into the current century. Just bring us into the last century. We don't mind if we're a century behind, because I think the bill might even be older than that. The bill to remove the penalty for cohabitation by unmarried men and women passed 29-9 with a lot of support, obviously. It would also remove a penalty for unmarried couples who associate in a lewd and lascivious manner. And what that's getting at is what they do physically. Not just living under the same roof, but what they're doing under that roof. And by the way, that portion of the law is absolutely unenforceable. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that consenting adults in private, you cannot regulate the physical behavior between them. And that is the U.S. Supreme Court. That ruling has happened. So the law on the books is, in that case, outdated to the point where it is unconstitutional and unenforceable. But they should remove it because it's stupid to have it on the books. One senator said the criminal penalty for cohabitation wasn't good policy, but he didn't agree with the resulting tax effects from repealing the provision. I very easily would be a yes on this bill if the tax structure continued to encourage marriage, he said. So apparently, this man wants our tax code to encourage marriage. So the tax code, why not the motor vehicle code? We ought to have a law in the motor vehicle code that encourages marriage. And the tax code, obviously, and the cohabitation law. You know, we want every law out there to encourage marriage. What about the Revised Judicature Act? Does the RJA encourage marriage? Someone get on this right now. Having two parents who live together but aren't married isn't the optimal environment for raising children, he added. Having two parents who live together but aren't married. So in his mind, if there are two parents willing to live together, but they aren't married, one should move out because it's not optimal for raising children. So another senator spoke against the removal of the penalty, saying he favors laws that promote good morals. Good morals. We should legislate morals, even though the U.S. Supreme Court has said that you can't do that. Sorry. In addition to those two, there were 7 others who voted against the repeal. And one of them, griping, said this bill is very representative of where we are as a nation and as a culture. So apparently he'd like the nation and the culture to go back to a simpler time when you would prosecute somebody for living with somebody else they're not married to. The proposal now goes to the State House for consideration. And then, of course, like all bills up on Capitol Hill, it'll be sent to the governor for signature. And I suspect it will pass. But I decided to do the story now because, number one, its passage is pretty much a foregone conclusion. But number two, because I had so many people ask me about it. But I looked it up. It's MCL 750.335, 750.335. And it's entitled Lewd and Lascivious Cohabitation and Gross Lewdness. Gross lewdness. Any man or woman not being married to each other who lewdly and lasciviously associates and cohabits together, and any man or woman, married or unmarried, who is guilty of open and gross lewdness and lascivious behavior is guilty of a misdemeanor punishable by imprisonment for not more than a year or a fine of not more than $1,000. No prosecution shall be commenced under the section after 1 year from the time of committing the offense. So that last sentence is a statute of limitations, 1 year. But prior to that, you'll notice there's 2 things that are illegal. One is the living together, and one is the behavior together. And so, in theory, I believe you could be convicted of both of those if they were to catch you living under the same roof, acting lewdly and lascivious with each other. Now, we do have to point out that it does say open, guilty of open and gross lewdness. And I poked around on this last night because I was curious whether or not that had been interpreted by a court. And many people had come to the conclusion, and I think this might be true, that you could make the argument that the gross lewdness and lascivious behavior to be open would have to be done in the public space where someone could see you. And so you might say, but Steve, wait a second. Now you're stretching it, because if you're doing it in the confines of your own home, windows are closed, shades are drawn, and you're inside the house and everyone else in the world is outside your house, and you do something in there, how would anybody ever catch you? Well, believe it or not, there are cases. I'll give you the best example of a fact pattern that would create a situation like this. You are unmarried to your partner, but the two of you are at home doing something that adults do with each other when they love each other very, very much. And the police have a search warrant for your house for some reason. It's got nothing to do with your behavior, but they have a search warrant for your house. So they bust in with a search warrant and catch you doing what I just described. So they saw you doing that, and they're law enforcement, and you're breaking the law. Guess what? You're now under arrest. And there were examples, and those are some of the cases that made it up on appeal to higher courts. And that was when police had a reason to be there and saw someone doing something that, technically speaking, was still on the books as illegal. So this law, 750.335, is still on the books in Michigan, but won't be for much longer. But it did say that any man or woman not married to each other who lewdly and lasciviously associate and cohabit together. It says associates and cohabits together, but that's okay. And any man or woman, married or unmarried, who is guilty of open and gross lewdness and lascivious behavior is guilty. So it was two different things there. So they're trying to repeal the statute. Looks like they're going to do it. But Michigan is one of the last 2 states to have this on their books. And the problem with these laws is that many of these laws, if you just looked at the lewd and lascivious behavior, if you stand up and go, I would like to remove the law from the books that outlaws lewd and lascivious behavior, you can imagine what your opponents are going to do. He's in favor of lewd and lascivious behavior. Look up what that means. And he's in favor of it. And so it's kind of hard sometimes to have these laws removed from the books, despite the fact that they are outdated and archaic. So that's where we are in the state of Michigan, on the verge of joining the rest of you, well, most of the rest of you, in getting our laws in line with the current societal norms, as I like to say. So Craig Mauger of the Detroit News wrote that Michigan senators spar over unenforced penalty for unmarried couples living together. And it has, as far as I know, not been enforced in a long, long time. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Life is 10% what you experience and 90% how you respond to it.